podcast about product management, user experience design, technology, and more. This is Product by Design. All right, welcome to another episode of Product by Design. I am Kyle Evans, and we are joined by another awesome guest today, and I'm super excited. Welcome to the podcast, Satyam. It is a pleasure to have you with us today.
Same here. It's a privilege to be here. Thank you for having me, Kyle.
Awesome. Well, let me do a quick intro, and then you can tell us a little bit more about yourself. Satyam has led various in-house design organizations at companies such as Citrix and PayPal. He's also an alumnus of Harvard Business School and is now the founder of UXReactor, which is a specialized UX design firm, and the author of a new book, which is a great read. I just finished it last week. So, Satyam, I am super excited for our conversation. But why don't you tell us more about yourself?
Thank you, Kyle. So, as you mentioned, I'm Satyam Kantamneni. I'm the founder and the chief troublemaker at a design firm called UXReactor. I think the essence of the firm overall, to just give you an introduction, has been I also call it the biggest experiment in my life, where we're trying to understand how can design drive business value as a multiplier. And so that was the basic problem statement to start the firm. And that's how, I think we are 8 years in the journey. My background is in engineering. I'm a trained electronics engineer. Then I've studied human factors engineering after that. So studied technology and how technology related to humans, and then studied business, as you mentioned, at Harvard Business School. So the trifecta of design, technology, and business. So fortunate enough, and I really believe in the construct of creativity is when multiple dots from different contexts connect. And I've been privileged to have at least studied three different varied streams of streams of thought. And that also influences a lot of how we operate.
That's super interesting. And I'm excited to dive into more of your experience, because I think it's fascinating, and it has obviously shaped not only what you've done previously, but a lot of what you're doing and how you're helping other businesses and companies, which is really, really interesting. But before we get into that, why don't you tell us a little bit more about what you enjoy doing outside of, some of the UX and engineering and some of the UXReactor things?
I have a few interests. I am a big fan of military history, especially history related to the Second World War. Every book I can find, I try to read. Every movie that comes out, try to watch. I'm a big, obviously, watch a lot of History Channel in that context. From an outdoor perspective, I like high altitude, trekking. That's something that I try to do as much as I can. The last one I summited was a mountain which was 15,500 feet in the Himalayas. And the pandemic obviously put some spanner to that, but my goal is to kind of continue to do that. So again, that's what keeps me grounded. And also, I think when you're in a mountain by yourself with no technology, I think it's a very different way of meditating. And so that's also where I get a lot of my energy.
Wow. That's super, super interesting. So is that the highest mountain that you've summited so far, the most recent one, or have you done higher ones?
So far, yeah.
Okay.
So I think it's a high altitude trek, and so it's not the same as a technical mountaineering, but that's the highest that I've summited so far. And in my list, obviously, I want to try to see if I can get to Mount Whitney, Mount Rainier. I think there's some ones in the US. But yeah, my goal is to kind of do more of that. As I get older, I want to do more.
Very nice. All right. That sounds really, really interesting. What's the highest one that you have on your sites? Is it some of the big ones like Everest and K2, or are those, not right now?
I think Everest Base Camp is something that I've thought about multiple times, and that is a 18,500 feet, climb. So, and that's when the base camp is. So then from there you start your true Everest mountaineering, which obviously I'm not a mountaineer. But yeah, I think that is obviously something that's on my bucket list. I want to do that sooner than later.
Okay. All right. Very cool. Okay. Well, let's dive into it because obviously super interested in both the book and some of the experience that you have. So we mentioned Citrix, PayPal, Harvard Business School, now UXReactor. Quite the resume. If you were to sum up, a key idea or to kind of wrap up a lot of this experience into a key idea or a key learning or a key takeaway, you know could you do that, and what would that be from your career so far to kind of sum everything up?
I think the single line statement that comes to my mind is the pursuit of driving business value. And each one of them is has been successful in different levels in this across the spectrum, but all of them have the same essence. I would say I was less successful in my earlier roles, and obviously that also became the pursuit of building the firm at UX Reactor. Uh, because there's different kinds of value, as I call out in the book too. There's different kinds of value that can be created for the business, and I always felt that we were creating value on more on the micro level than the macro. And so that became the foundational call to action. But all of them were trying to do the same. Every organization I've been in is like, how can design help the organization be more effective and efficient? It's again, some were more successful than others.
Right. Okay. No, that's really interesting. All right. We've kind of talked a little bit about it, but you've released the book, User Experience Design, a practical playbook to fuel business growth. And it's great. I found it really interesting as I was going through, because it's the first part of it is narrative, and then the second part of it is actual playbook. You have like the subtitle there, a practical playbook to fuel business growth, and that's like literally what the book, part of the book is a playbook where you can go through and there's actual like workbook style things where you can go through with a team or with a group and actually run the plays and run these playbook type exercises to do things that are in here. And we'll talk a little bit more about that, but I thought that was really, really interesting, along with the frameworks that you kind of go through. So maybe you can tell us a little bit more about the thinking behind the book, what drove you to kind of take that approach, and a little bit more about the background in writing it.
So I think I think building a product and and writing a book are not very different. I just did not connect the dots really. And partially because you still are trying to build it for an audience. In our case, when we started studying how businesses can drive value through design, we realized it's actually a multi-persona, multi-context situation. You have a leader that's driving it, you have practitioners that are doing it, you have collaborators who are collaborating with it, and you have newbies who are coming into this line of work. So there's a lot of different people who are getting involved. So the goal was, how do we kind of get them to kind of activate around driving insane business value through design? And in order to do that, we kind of sat down and said, me and the team sat down and said, what are some of the key problems they are struggling with, and each of these personas. So we realized that business leaders are like, how do I measure design? Or business leaders, how do I build a design team? How do I activate research? There was a lot of these how do I statements. So we had 27 how do I statements that we kind of came down to, and we said we're going to write a play for each statement. And we're not going to write a prescriptive play, but we're going to write a mindful play, which is also a big shift, because the challenge is there's no single prescription for everyone. So what we said is you need to be mindful of X, Y, and Z, and we defined about half a dozen to a little bit more variables for each play. So if someone wants to build a career ladder for the profession of user experience within their firm, then we actually called it out, like what are the different things they need to be mindful of, so they think about it and build it. So that is where the playbook comes into play. Just the same way as like, hey, when if somebody was going to design a party in their home, we say, think about the guests, think about the cuisine, think about the dietary restriction, think about alcohol and who's going to serve it. So there's all these things you need to be mindful of, and that's kind of how we have structured it. So everybody in this, or the 5 personas that are there, can drive it. But more importantly, it's written for business leaders and business stakeholders, because there's a lot of design books written to do this. I want to be like those top companies that have been driving business through design. but I just don't know how. And this book was written for them as a single place that they could go in and understand the different elements, the different variables, the different mindsets, and truly build a team that's going to make them win in this game of driving business value by design. And that was the essence. So it was a process of iteration, like building a product. We tested it, we iterated on it. We had to kind of rewrite it a couple of times. Thanks to Wiley, who was very, very patient with us through this as a publisher. But finally, I think we put out a reasonably good product out there, and so far it's been getting more one or two locations or geographies that you're working in. We are getting feedback from people in Malaysia and Australia and Europe. So it's kind of been fascinating in that to just observe how people are resonating with it.
Wow, that's really, really great. And the process of going through and writing a book it's super interesting because kind of like you mentioned, not that different than building a product and the iterative approach and the feedback, and then taking that and incorporating it and making it better each time, and then really ultimately creating something that is useful for the people who are going out and are the users of it and the customers of it. So it's like taking the same mindset that we as product people and designers have and creating a product that is hopefully serving a purpose and solving a problem for them. So I think that's a really good approach to it.
Absolutely.
So yeah. Diving into the book a little bit, you mentioned that there are multiple levels of design focus, with UI being kind of like the user interface, the product experience, and then the XT. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? Because I thought that was a really interesting approach to thinking about, like, within an organization, how you can think about the levels of almost like design maturity, but the 3 levels of design focus, as you kind of mentioned.
Absolutely. So it's fascinating. As I mentioned to you, the thread between all my experiences with all the organizations I've worked with have predominantly been, how do we drive business value by design? That while that was common, the challenge that we had was, what is the definition of value? So there's a UI level value, which, like, majority of the people who call themselves UX designers or practicing UX designers. And even now I see across LinkedIn, like, hey, do you like this UI or do you like this UI? I mean, that is awesome. I mean, that is a critical skill, but it's not what the profession is about. So the UI is designing a screen or designing an interaction with user research or design. That's kind of what UI is. But then when you start looking at it on a much more bigger level, the next level, which is product experience or a platform experience, where you have to think about the same construct across different modalities, different situations, that is actually when you start thinking about the much bigger problem. I mean, when designing a Uber is different from designing a booking a ride screen, right? So I think there's a lot more moving parts. There's a driver, there's a administrator in the back, there's an operations person in the back, there is a rider. So there's so many people who are designing for a platform, and that's kind of is a very different mindset, especially when you look at B2B products and so on and so forth. It's not about screen, it's about designing a system, which is what the next level of value creation is, and which is why you notice a lot of B2B companies are not as effective in leveraging that value creation as creating a beautiful screen or a page. The third level, which is the level that actually many companies have not yet completely gotten to, is the organizations that are experientially transformed, or what we call XT. These are organizations that understand the user really well across the org. This is not a PM who talks to the user or a marketer who talks to the user. This is the whole organization understand who the user is. They have high empathy for the user. They are innovating around the user. They are always tracking about the problems that they have around the user. Anyone in the company knows what are the top issues with who are users, what are the journey, what are the top issue. So there's a very different activation that happens when you are running on an XT level. Organizations and silos are broken down. There's a lot of those nuances that happen, and that is the third level of value creation. And obviously, as you get higher in the value, you kind of are generating a much bigger moat, which your competitors can't get into. And more importantly, you're also generating insane value. As often I ask people that are talking to me, I said, why is it that Apple creates a subset of all the products that Samsung creates, but Apple is the most valuable company and Samsung isn't, right? Samsung does everything that Apple does and makes more. It makes TVs, it makes, refrigerators, washing machines. But why is it that one is more valuable than other? I think that's the fundamental aspect, is like one is much more activated around the user and the experiences and so on. And the other is looking at it on a UI level. And that's why I think it was interesting when Apple sued Samsung. It was still UI level. Like you copied my grounded corners or my styles, and I'm like, those obviously can be copied within weeks and months. But then when you start looking at being user centered from as your DNA, that's what I tell business leaders. Is like, if you want to live a decade, focus on the user on XT level. If you want to live like a couple of years, then obviously focus on the PX level. If you want to live a couple of quarters and make your numbers, then focus on the UI level.
Yeah. I found that to be it rang so true. And I loved it so much because it's the easiest thing to focus on really is that UI level. Like when you're just looking at the screen and saying like, hey, here's the changes that we need to make, or, here from either a stakeholder perspective or a designer perspective, like whatever the perspective, like those are easy things to do because it's very much like what you're seeing on the screen. And, it's very,
right.
It's very deceptive because, those are things that, like you said, anybody can copy. And then when you get into the next level, taking that a layer deeper, like the product experience, which, a lot of us focus on. And I think that's even more critical because, the UI is important, but that's just like the visual layer. Getting into the product where you're actually like getting into the interactive experience and how does it actually flow and what's the interaction? Like that's far more important than the UI because that's like how we actually interact with it. But then taking that even to the next level, like you're talking about, where it's not just the product experience and the interaction there, it's making that part of the entire system within the company, that it's not just like, it's not the UI, which is very surface level. It's not just the product, which is tying it all together, but then it's tying that product to the entire company. So it's not just the product team and designers who understand it, but it's the sales and CS, the customer support, and everybody is tied into this whole ecosystem, and it's built around delivering that value to a customer in a way that just can't be replicated by competitors or by other companies. Like you mentioned with Apple, like to build that into the DNA of a company is so much more difficult than just building a pretty UI or even a good product experience, which is difficult, but it's not as difficult as building a company that has the whole experience top to bottom of focusing on that type of value. I thought that was just a really, really good way of looking at it.
I actually can give you an example, Kyle, that may actually help the listeners a bit, if I may. So we actually were working with a client. The big thing is, as most companies today, they had a distributed team, and they had the largest engineering team in India. And now the challenge is that you're as smart as the engineers are in India, they don't understand the true context of the users that are using, and the product is being used by people in the United States, and the users are in the United States. So and the challenge was that, obviously, requirements were being given, and then people are designing to those requirements or building the product to that requirements. But then there was a lot of gap in bugs and, issues and not thinking through the thing. And then we root caused it, saying that they have no idea how this will actually play out because they never understand how that healthcare system, in this case, it was automotive dealership, how a dealership works. So we actually said, you know what? Let's change. So then in order to activate the XT part, we said everybody who joins the company has to understand who the users are. They will listen to. And so in this case, obviously, we had to create artifacts from the research that we had done and create material for everyone to get onboarded, them to listen to the customer, observe the customer, get video reels of the customer. So get them to empathize way more than just saying oh, there is a certain persona. And that activation itself started helping people, because now in discussions and ideation, it's not like, give me the spec and I'll code it. It's like they're asking the why questions. And then when why, everybody's starting to ask the why around the user, you actually have quality automatically improving. It's not somebody that, and you're not quality checking implementation, but you're quality checking the outcome, that have we achieved the problem that or the solution that we needed to solve for the user. And in this case, that took a process for us to take a step back, work with HR, work with onboarding, work with the engineering managers. But that was a shift. And we write in the book called Empathy Scale, but that actually allowed us to kind of increase the empathy scale of the teams, and that allowed them to kind of truly now start getting more involved. And obviously, they are such a valuable company today. And we see these small activities that start driving bigger business value when you're experientially transformed.
Yeah. Yep. No, I think that's perfect. It makes perfect sense. You also mentioned too some statistics around it that you found that around 20% of companies have no focus when it comes to this. Around 50% focus on UI, which anecdotally that rings pretty true. 25% focus on the product experience, and then about just 5% focus on the experience transformation or the whole organization. As you kind of progress along that path, and the value that you create really grows, and the ability to replicate it really shrinks, like we've been talking about. And the ability kind of like we've been talking about for the competitors to come in and replicate that, it takes, you talk about this in the book, that you go from being able to replicate a UI in weeks, a product in months, and a company in years. I guess wanted to just kind of like dive into that a little bit more. Like, what has been some more of your experience in that, specifically in kind of helping people both come to that realization and then build into that mindset of focusing more on that, and then creating like companies around the design transformation or the whole experience, as opposed to just UI or product?
So I think that the different parts to this conversation. I think the first thing is that many companies don't even know that XT is a possibility. PX is a possibility. That's the foundational problem. And because majority of them are focused on UI, because it's typically, again, it's a reflection of where they report to. And most times they're reporting into a team that's very tactically focused, which is like, hey, can we do a release? Can we get a specific thing for that release? Can we get the screens? I cannot tell you how many times I've had leaders come to me and said, I have 50 engineers, I have 20 engineers who are waiting there for screens, and can you give us screens really fast? That's why they just don't know that there's a bigger essence to that. And then when there's some companies that move on from that stage to becoming product centric. And for us, we've actually started putting a gate that when we realize that a company is coming from a UI centric perspective, we may not be the best partner for them. So we actually do coach them on that. And some people would say, okay, fine. I mean, I need screens, and I'll go somewhere else. And this is the generation where they go to a Fiverr or they go to Upwork and said, I'm on 5 screens, 2 screens, and so on and so forth. I mean, go get the screens. But if your goal is to get a screen, absolutely you can do that. If your goal is to be user centered, that's not the way to do it. Yep. Now, product experience, which is kind of again a smaller subset than the few, they have the research, they activate, they think about road journeys, they think about workflows, and say, like, how can I make a workflow better? If I can do it this way, can I implement it some other aspect? They're looking much more system thinking perspective. So we enjoy working with those companies. So again, having worked with the Citrixes of the world, and that's kind of where we've been spending a lot of energy, where you're looking at a user calling, doing self-service in the product, or calling customer support, or working with the professional services team, kind of helping you migrate better. These are all systems and tools that need to come together on a platform level, and we make sure that every facet is thought through and built. And you're looking at getting the whole product in place, and that is where we've been generating a lot of value. A lot of the companies we work with are predominantly in the PX and the XT level. UI obviously is a side effect that comes through all that. And we are noticing that. In fact, we have had companies that have come to us with a back of napkin idea and for wanting UI, and we're like, nope, let's build a product experience. And then 6 years later, they're sold for 9 figures. We have had organizations that came to us for PX, and then we're like, nope, you need to activate as a XT company. And then these are some of the things, as I say, UXReactor was an experiment for the longest while. So we would say, nope, I don't think this is going to solve it. Let's go do this. Again, it's like a teaching hospital. The doctors are looking at how do we solve that disease. In our case, how do we drive business value? And then we said, nope, you need to do research here. You need to activate your team overall with more empathy. And in this case, the company in 6 years was valued at 3.5 billion, and they grew 300% year over year last year. And the most important thing, the other day I noticed the news that their biggest competition that when we started working has now gone private. And the CEO is no more the CEO. So you start seeing those impacts of when the business is truly turning, when you become customer centric and user centric. And then finally, talking about the moat itself. So the moat actually is a construct, when you start looking from the study of business, Warren Buffett talks about it a lot more. He says, I'll only invest in companies that have a defensible moat. That means they have protection. And moat is a construct that comes from the medieval ages where, a fort has a big protection that, nobody can attack it. And the same applies to businesses. So we believe that design and experience, when you get to the XT level, the moat is so big because you have to change your people, your process, your environment, your mindsets. And to change that, it's a huge turnaround. And leaders have to kind of go through that. So those who already made that turnaround and investment, they are so far ahead that, you really can't even catch up to them.
Yeah. I think that's totally correct in my experience as well, is that having an organization that is focused on that is it's such an advantage for the organization competitively and in just a number of different ways in what they're producing and shipping, and then also like in attracting the best kind of talent to an organization, because I think that the best kind of people want to work for companies who are very focused on creating the best things for their users and have that very focused mindset of we're creating, everybody is focused on being able to deliver that type of value for customers, and there's not that divided mindset of what every different groups are doing different types of things, but it's very, very singular and kind of permeates through everything. It just has a different feel to it. And speaking of that, you mentioned in the book too that there are inside first organizations and user first organizations, which really stuck with me as well, because I have definitely worked in and I've worked with both types of organizations. But tell us a little bit more about your experience seeing those types of organizations, both inside first and user. Well, tell us what those mean, inside first and user first, and some of your experiences with those types of organizations.
So I'm sure a lot of the people would relate to this. You go into an organization and then you have a leader who's like, I think this is what the user wants. And if you ask the users the Henry Ford often used statement, like if you ask, what the users want, they'll just ask for a faster horse. So you get organizations that believe they know what they need. And exactly the example that I gave you, which is like, hey, I need 10 screens. I need, so inside first are the organization internally is driving the innovation. So they are looking at maybe a top leader or a group of people who already discussed it. And you see those a lot of times. And I've been, I can give you an example where we're working with a client and we said, hey, we need to bring users in and we need to have a conversation with them. And they're like, nope, we already have all this data. We have salespeople who are selling to them. Let's kind of talk to them and then figure this out. And we did. And we actually spent the time. And 4 weeks down the line, we are like sitting there in a meeting saying that, are you sure this is what they want? And then they actually come to a point of realization, like, I'm not sure. And then we had to kind of again again for us, we say, okay, we have to bring in users, add another a few weeks to kind of the process. But the whole essence is that's what Inside First is. And I'll give you a statistic that 40% of the products and features today are getting shipped without talking to even one user. Right? That's a report that McKinsey came out with. And it's just fascinating. And I'm not surprised because they are all like, hey, we'll give what the users want and they will figure it out. Now, what's an outside in or a user first organization? The user organization is like we always say, the word user experience design is a very deliberate construction of you start with the user, you think about their experience, then you think about their design, and then you think about the technology that is needed to make that happen. It's not the other way around. Inside first organizations are like, I have this technology, we have this design. Can you make it work for the user? And that's the inside first organization. And outside first is like, who's my user? What's their experience? What's their design around making that experience happen? And that is where the sequence actually changes, and the mindset changes, how you operate changes, how you incentivize changes. Everything evolves between these two organizations. And we strongly believe that, again, our fundamental belief is you follow the user, you will get to the bank with a lot of money. You follow your own internal systems and so on and so forth. You will get somewhere with maybe a little bit efficiency, but you again will not be competing with the best out there.
Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely right. And it can be a really difficult thing too. I think in principle, we all understand that, but it can be very, very difficult. Especially, I've seen that with younger product managers and designers who feel like taking the feedback from the head of sales or the head of marketing or whoever the leaders are in the executive suite is primarily what their role is, and that can be an important input, but that's not what the role is. Like, it's important to understand that feedback, but it's not about taking the wish list from the head of sales or from the CEO and then making that happen. Like, that is kind of like you were saying, like, that's the inside first point of view, and that's not the way that you make like really good products. You can have people inside your organization who have like really good insight and good views, and those are important, but you have to take the user first perspective and really create that type of culture where you understand what users are doing and what they need, and go out and really talk with them and see and understand that, and then take that back and make sure everybody understands it as well. Otherwise, you really are building just what you want, or what the CEO wants, or what the marketing team wants, and not what the user wants. And that, kind of like you said, that can get you part of the way there, but ultimately you're not going to have the best product or the best company that you could if you took a user first perspective.
I think that the simple fact in most organizations is that the users will always outlast the leaders. So follow the people that will be there the longest, and that actually will define the success of the company, and whoever the leader is, right? And I think that if you really look at, the leaders are also trying to activate around users. If there's no customers, there's no users for a product, the company dies right there. But if there's no CEO, somebody else will step in. I mean, that the company will still continue. And I think that's that essence of understanding organizational discipline or organizational intent, I think, is missing. But once many people understand that, it gets there. It's not an easy job, by the way. I mean, this transformation is not easy. I mean, we are working with organizations for a long time. Some are successful, some are not. But it is a journey, and those who are successful in doing it, it takes the right people, the right mindset, the right environment, and the right processes. And if you're not willing to get to that investment, obviously you will not get to that final value.
Yeah. You've touched on one of the things that I find really, really interesting, and probably one of the most challenging things, which is the transformation and mindset shift. Maybe you can tell us a little bit more about how you have seen successful transformations and shifts in organizations. What has worked and what hasn't, and how have you seen successes? What have been either some of the characteristics or things that have helped companies and organizations be successful? And then on the flip side, maybe what are some of the things that cause companies not to be able to make the shift to being more experience focused or design, the overall design and experience focused and user focused?
I think we kind of define a formula in the book. We call it the BVD. Business to drive business value by design, you need 4 key variables to work. You need the right people, the right process, the right mindsets, and the right environment. And all of them are multiplicative. So it's a formula is each multiplies each other. But at the same time, with multiply, one is zero, everything gets zeroed out. So that's kind of the essence in terms of giving a mathematical structure to it. Now, organizations that have succeeded have the right leaders. We talk about the construct of a chief experience officer because there are silos in every organization. You have to break those silos down. You need to have a single person who's going to say, how is the experience going to work? Because the user really doesn't care how your org is structured, whether they're calling customer service or they're doing self-service or using professional service. They actually are expecting an experience that's cohesive and consistent. But for that to be done, you need a single leader that's going to activate it. So again, from a people perspective, you need the right leaders, you need the right practitioners, you need the right collaborators, and so on and so forth. So that's kind of what we talk about, and the different kinds of people, and then when bringing those people together. So that's why the most successful companies have the right people, or the more mature companies have the researchers, the designers, the practitioners, the collaborators. Everybody are working together. At the same time, as I said, 20% of the organizations have still the engineer doing the screens and talking to users, and so they are trying to figure out the best that they can. So again, that doesn't work. Having the right people works. Related to that is the right process. I mean, what's your process of bringing insights into the company? What's the process of curating it? What's the process of activating your roadmaps around that? One of the biggest mistakes companies that are not effectively transformed is they don't even have a roadmap around the top users that they care about. They have a product roadmap, they have a marketing roadmap. But my point is, if your user is a doctor who's going to be using that product, what's your roadmap for that doctor? How do you make their experience better every release, every month, every quarter that you're going forward with? And most leaders don't have one. And we say, what's your experience roadmap for each user that you really care about? So that's, again, procedural changes that need to kind of happen. Mindsets, and I talk about the 5 mindsets in the book, and you need most of the organizations are much more collaborative, much more multidisciplinary. You really need to kind of have people think about the system, think about the business, think about the experience, think about the design, and then bring all that together. So there's a lot of these subtleties that go into it, and the smaller you are, obviously the faster you can make the changes. So when we work with, our favorite area of working with companies is mid-sized organizations that are less than 1,000 people, and the leadership team all can fit in a single conference room of 10, 15 people. That's where we can activate the most. So that's where the larger you get, it's a bigger, a turnaround. And so we ourselves as a firm, we specialize in working with the medium-sized companies because leaders are much more aware, much more adaptable. Experiments can be run much more faster. And the final piece is, which is just overall environment, the culture, the environment that gets created in a company to activate on being user-centric, right? Why can't a finance person come in and kind of ideate around how to solve the user's problem, right? Most organizations are siloed in a construct where, like, hey, I'm a PM, I define all the requirements, and you are a designer, you're going to do the screens. Oh, you're an engineer, you're going to code it. Oh, so you are a professional services person, you're going to just go deploy it. This whole silos is like an environment that enables silos is actually obviously going to not be as successful. And an organization that incentivizes thinking about the user, bringing people together, activating them around the insight. That's kind of what successful companies look like. And the more we have been doing this with the companies we work with, we're starting to see, first of all, fun is increasing because people are starting to feel more empowered. Second is that experimentation is increasing because, you're like, hey, can I try this? I'm like, absolutely, let's try this. Because especially when you're working with digital tools, everything can be, the cost of experimentation is so low. And that also kind of improves. And then when you're starting to activate and ideate around users and user problems, there's a certain energy that kind of comes in. And that's why I said, we're seeing companies that go from like, I'm designing screens to like, hey, I want to nail this for the user. And then for that, you start seeing adjacent business models, you start looking at other models. So there's a lot of those things. Only 5% of the companies get it. And our goal is obviously to kind of get more and more companies into that layer. And our journey so far has been fascinating working with the companies we work with.
Yeah, no, that sounds really, really interesting. And to have each of those different areas, I think, is so critical. And without each of them, you kind of, like you mentioned, you're not going to have success in a transformation. And I think that's definitely been my experience, and it can be definitely one of the most difficult things. Shifting the an organization, because you have to have the right people and the leadership and the mindset and all of those things to make it work. For you, what have you found makes a really good design team, or a really good team in general, in order to affect some of these changes within an organization?
I think, first of all, I would say the mindset of the team, right? I'll give you the example of UXReactor at least. We have brought in, we have 60 people strong at this point, but of the 60 people, we have 22 different educational disciplines. So we have engineers, accountants, fashion designers, graphic designers, every kind of engineer, mechanical, civil, electronics. So it just brings a lot of eclectic backgrounds together. However, with a common intent, which is like we're going to all together solve business problems through experience design and understanding system design. So that's the first part, that they are eclectic. They come from different backgrounds. Second part is that you effectively, and I don't see that a lot more. I see a lot of organizations are starting to silo themselves into like, I am so and so, and I talk about in the book like the best designer that the world saw, often people even in the is I would say Leonardo da Vinci. Here's somebody who lived in the Renaissance time, and is as good as a biologist as he was a mathematician, as well as he was an engineer to an artist. And the construct of a polymath, an organization that supports multidisciplines to come together, actually enables it. And that was also the strength of Steve Jobs. Was he the best designer? No. I mean, was he the best a business person? No. But he understood a little bit of everything, that he could connect the dots. And you see that with also other, it's that person organization that supports that. These are the teams that kind of will succeed. They are collaborative, they're experimental, they are open to being wrong, and they celebrate that as well. Many companies and leaders I've seen, they talk about failure, but there's no construct around failure, and there's no support structure around failure. Like, yeah, you're talking about giving the prize to the best experiment or the spectacular failure. No, I mean, till you don't incentivize, behaviors won't change. Have you put measures around failure? No, you haven't. That will not get activated. So these are the subtleties. But a good team is eclectic. Now, from a mindset level, so all these are still philosophical. But now, when you talk about it in the context of experience design, you need people who are talking to the users and are user research skills are important. You need leaders who are activating this and bringing and changing and change agents in the organization. You need experience strategists and chief experience officers. You need interaction designers who are looking at the system and designing the system and the workflows and so on and so forth. You're looking at visual designers, or looking at so it's actually a multidisciplinary skill that needs to come together. A lot of UI centric companies is that they hire one person and say start designing screens, but they want the impact of a PX. That will never happen, because it's truly like you don't go to a hospital and say just give me the anesthesiologist and the surgery will happen. No, I mean, it's a team that comes together. And ideally, if you're looking at a critical or a unique disease, then you need a collaborative team. And most of the times when you're designing products or experiences, it's high ambiguity. And when you're high ambiguity, you need high collaboration, high experimentation. And so again, I kind of answered that in a lot of ways. So there's hard skills, there is the soft skills. I actually see the soft skills actually being a much bigger, important element and a missing skill today than the hard skills.
Yeah. No, that makes a ton of sense. And having an eclectic team and a diverse team, and then bringing in a lot of those different skill sets, both the hard skills and the soft skills, and making sure that it really is a team of complementary skills, like you said, where it's not just the best at one or two things, but it's all of the different skills that can kind of complement each other and make sure that it's complete, kind of like you're saying, so that it's to do the surgery. It's everybody working together to make it happen with all of the different skills. I think that's a really great analogy. We've talked a lot about transformation and organization, and I'm curious, how does that look in the evolving economy? Because obviously, a lot of things we've seen a lot of change over the course of the pandemic the last few years, and we're seeing a lot of change now too. So how does all of this fit into the context of the change that's happened and the change that's happening now, and what potentially could be happening going forward.
No, absolutely. I think one of the things that the pandemic did is it put digitization right in our face. I mean, if education had to be 100% digitized, I mean, now people are looking at it because that's what happened for a whole year, where universities and colleges had to go digital, healthcare had to go digital, legal had to go digital, and you have a bunch of videos on YouTube where, like, you have Zoom litigation going on, but that's not how it should work. I mean, you actually look at that, education is a multi-billion-dollar opportunity. Healthcare is $1 trillion opportunity, and these opportunities can still be highly enabled through experiences. Now, what's unfortunately happening, and again, before the pandemic too, there was a huge push for digital transformation, which technology-led transformations. With the pandemic, obviously that became a must to survive. What we're noticing in the market right now is what I call digitally transformed, experientially painful. And these are where, like, you have to work through multiple systems, multiple logins, and multiple screens to kind of go through a experience. And it's painful. It's you can't remember. I mean, the other day I would like to give you an example that Costco. I've gone to Costco to return a product, and they could return the product that was bought in the store really with one click, but then online was a painful experience for them because they had to remember when I bought it, and they're asking me, when did you buy it? And I'm like, I don't remember when I bought it. I mean, is it within the last year or two? Because they looked through every aspect of it. They had to write the order number, and they had to go and return it manually. And that is, as I say, digitally transformed, experientially painful. And you're seeing a lot of that happen. So first of all, I think that needs to go away. And the company that figures this out, that how can they experientially transform these massive industries of healthcare, education, agriculture, legal, they will have huge opportunity going forward. So that's the foundational belief. Now, coming to the macroeconomic situation right now with the headwinds of the economy and the recession and so on, I think I actually believe it's a huge opportunity, because companies can now don't have to worry about the market pressure that I have to grow as fast as everyone else. They can take a step back and really now focus on what's right. There is still going to be significant investments in tech. But I think focusing on tech to enable it the right way, building the right experiences, enabling the right people, I think that is where the huge opportunity is. And I'm very, very bullish on the fact that the organizations that can leverage both the macroeconomic situation as well as what's happened with the tech-enabled systems that are being now thrust on us. I think this is the future, and I believe the next decade is about experiences, and because all products are really consistent on feature level, and competition with especially the SaaSification of all the products is only a click away. So now experience is how you lead, and how you kind of create a system experience is how you kind of bring in your customer and keep your customer together. And I think that is where we play. And that's why I'm very bullish on opportunities ahead for companies that get it.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally makes sense. Tons of opportunity, but also tons of space for vast improvement right now. And you can still see that. We think about how far we've come, but there's still so much room for so much improvement in so many different industries, and you named a number of them. I think those of us in a lot of the digital space think that we've really tapped into a lot of it, but there's just so much untapped space out there that needs transformation, and just has not really undergone the same level of both transformation and digitalization that a lot of other industries have so far. So tons and tons of opportunity out there. For those getting into UX and design, what kind of advice would you give for somebody starting out, or somebody looking to kind of level up their career right now?
First of all, I would say this is an awesome career if you're getting into product and experience overall, which I actually see as two sides of the same coin. And this is a phenomenal thing if you have the aptitude and the attitude to go along. And that's kind of I see as the biggest differentiator. The attitude of, like, hey, you have problem solvers. I mean, it's not often. I mean, if you really think about how innovation or innovators thought work, they saw a problem, they ideated on it, they prototyped something on it, and they take it to market and experiment with it. that in a sense is what today's skills, and that's what the expectation is. Every problem you can quickly ideate, and that's what Edison did, and that's how he kind of became so successful, and that just became part of his daily routine and ethos. And that's what we are as designers and product stakeholders. So for first of all, that if you look at yourself as the mindset of that you're an innovator and you're kind of rapidly experimenting, rapidly building and understanding stuff, I think that will take the person in this profession of a long way. However, I would also say that it's still a profession of adolescents. There's no real. I mean, people from business background. I mean, both product and design right now. People come from a lot of eclectic backgrounds. It's good. It's a melting pot. So it's a profession that's kind of coming to adolescence. So I think the factor is there's growing pains, and I think this is the time to kind of come in and kind of engage and kind of help formulate this profession overall. So it's exciting. Again, I say that it's an attitude for an excitement to this. This is the right profession. If you're going to follow along and follow a process or a method, I think you will get bored really fast. But this is, like I say, those who have the aptitude and attitude, this is the profession for the next decade.
Yeah, absolutely agree with that. I wanted to also go to one of the examples. So we've talked about your book a whole bunch, and as far as some of the content at the beginning, but you have a whole number of examples within the playbook portion, which kind of go through and talk about, different frameworks to use. And you talk a lot about, using frameworks that kind of give you just some things to go through, some examples to walk through and use for different scenarios and different teams. I'd love to just, use one as an example and highlight one and just, show here's how to use it and here's what to do. Is there one in there that stands out in your mind, either from our conversation or that you just have found particularly useful in your experience?
I think what would be relevant in the product and design is what we call a product experience plan, and it's a plan. It's a play that we called out within the product thinking segment.
Yep.
And we see a lot of leaders coming in and saying like, hey, we need to design screens. And I'm like, okay, fine. While we are designing today's screens, what research are we doing for tomorrow? What experiments are we doing for tomorrow? And what research are we doing for day after tomorrow? That mindset of saying, what is our 30-day to 90-day plan around that? So that is a whole play that we kind of called out, and we defined a lot of different things that need to happen. Most program managers or scrum managers don't understand that. And so that's the reason why we kind of call that out. It's like, hey, you need to think about when you're activating around users and user centricity, you need to start planning those things. You can't be, and most of the research, unfortunately, is very summative in nature. What does that mean? It means that you're validating whether, this works in a way you are intended to. And that is one style of research. But then if you're looking at formative or generative research, you're looking at what are the pain points for users, and that has to be planned at least a few weeks or months ahead before you start activating that into your requirements or your plans. So again, having a 90-day plan, the product experience plan is what we call that as one play. Then having a roadmap around each user that you care about, we call it the experience roadmap play. So those are all, there's so many different plays. I mean, in a sense, each one of them has their own value at different times. So I don't think there's a favorite, but I would call the product experience play as one play. I would strongly call out for product stakeholders as well as design stakeholders to design practitioners to kind of really activate around.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's really good. And I'm looking at it right now, and it's great because it has like who to get involved, a section for like what to do, and then how to go through it. And it's a really fascinating thing. Like it's a full, like, here's the steps to do and here's what you're going to want to get out of it. So it's really great stuff. And there are a lot of plays in here for all different scenarios, like you were talking about. So it's a really good playbook.
No, I was just saying that's the intent. The goal is it's still work in progress. We are still, as we are working with stakeholders who are reading the book and activating around it, we are adjusting and updating it. I'm sure there will be a second edition as people engage and then collaborate. But overall, I think the essence is like one of the things within that experience I'll just call out was many people don't plan out review cycles. review cycles with different stakeholders, and that becomes such a last minute angst. So our goal is to kind of run zero angst. So like, again, how do you plan that? How do you plan your research, your reviews, your engagements, and all those things have to be really thought through. So it's, again, you have to be mindful about all those things to kind of run an effective program, and that's kind of what we are talking in each play.
Yeah. No, that's great. Well, this has been a really, really great conversation, Satyam, and I appreciate it. Is there anything else before I do have a couple last questions, but is there anything else that you would like to share before we kind of wrap this up?
The only thing I would share is that, again, the book is available for anyone to buy in any of the their favorite booksellers, Amazon, Target, and Barnes and Nobles. But the more important thing is, if anyone buys the book and then finds it and resonate with it enough that they want to write a review, just drop us a note or drop me a note at hello@uxreactor.com, and we'll send you. We have a special gift, a couple of gifts that we want to send over to that person that allows them to kind of further engage with the content and the material. But again, that's just the one thing I would say. I know we spoke a lot about the book, but more importantly, the book allows people to kind of understand and do it themselves, or at least be more aware. And again, if anyone wants to kind of get more help, they can always reach out, and we'll be happy to kind of talk.
Okay, great. Well, we'll put those links in the show notes as well, so you can check out the book. You can reach out to Satyam and check out UXReactor as well. So I guess before we let you go, we like to end with a couple just questions about shout outs or gripes to anything. But if there's anything that you have been reading or watching or listening to that you found particularly interesting recently.
The most recent book I read is a book called Extreme Ownership, a phenomenal book. It's around the Navy SEALs and how they operate, and how this particular the context was in the Iraq war. And I just think there's a lot. I mean, from a context of, so that's what I'm reading, but that's the same essence we need to operate on, because we see a lot of problems. I think one of the biggest cancers for corporate innovation is silos, and the way to kind of attack that is with extreme ownership and what we call an outcome mindset, also in the book. But I would say that's one aspect. The other book that I have on my read list is *Sapiens*. I want to read about it, read more. That's been recommended to me. So again, I try to read or at least listen to at least 1 to 2 books, in a year that I really focus on, which is not as much, but I'm getting slowly and better on that.
Yeah. No, that's good. Extreme ownership is a really, really good one. I love that one. And I have not read *Sapiens* yet, but it keeps coming up over and over again. So it's on my short list as well. So probably have to get to it here in the next couple of weeks or so, hopefully. So that, everybody seems to recommend that one as well. So it sounds like a really good one. And then I guess finally, any products that you have been enjoying or not enjoying recently that you want to give a shout out to? Could be digital products or physical products, anything that you've liked or not liked recently.
I mean, the unfortunate, I would say, curse of being a designer is that you understand the sausage making so well that you start identifying how a product was not working as well, or what you expect things are. So I think there is that's much more critical on that end. But I must say, some of the travel products that are out there, whether it's kayak or other, they've become much more user centric, to the point of they understand where things are. It's not transactional as hey, what's point A to point B. Yeah. So I would say there's some delight that's kind of coming in. The other day I saw where I could see a heat map of all the different options from my different destinations and or my point A to point B, and I'm like, oh, this is a great way for me to make a decision on when and how and so on and so forth. I wish they had added a few more other things to that to kind of continue that journey. But again, I would say those are the things. But products wise. One of the products that we designed that's actually doing really well in the automotive industry is a product called Techion. So they basically, are changing the way automotive retail works. and experientially. And so how you buy, how you service, how you kind of communicate with the dealership, how your data is kind of all evolving. So again, check this company out. They're going places, and they are hyper growth, doing really well, and we're glad to be part of that journey.
Very cool. Yeah, we'll have to take a look at that. That sounds really, really interesting. Cool. Well, Satyam, again, it has been a great conversation, a real pleasure to both read through the book that you have written recently, to talk to you about the book and all of your experience. We will put all of the links in the show notes so people can find out more about you, about that book, about the work you've been doing. But I want to say again, thank you very much. This has been a really, really great conversation.
Likewise, Kyle. Thank you so much. Appreciate you being an awesome host.
All right. Well, thank you, and thank you everyone for listening. Thanks again for listening. If you like the show, be sure to follow or subscribe on your favorite podcast app. You can follow the show on Twitter at @ProdByDesign. That's prod_by_design. You can follow me at Kyle Larry Evans on Twitter as well. If you want more product conversation, check out my newsletter, Product Thinking, at productthinking.cc. You can follow me on Medium at Kyle Larry Evans as well, or check out my Medium publication, Product by Design. Thanks again.